5 years, that's how long the ocean kept its secret. The kind of secret that doesn't wash up on shore or get caught in fishing nets. This one was wedged deep, locked away in the coral, waiting. For Meredith and David Caldwell, their last night on Earth should have been a celebration. They were engaged, young, in love, and ready to start their life together in that beautiful beach house in California. Friday night, perfect weather, dinner planned with their closest friends, and then, nothing. No fight, no struggle, no note. Just two people who vanished like ghosts, leaving behind only their cars in the driveway and questions that would haunt everyone who loved them. The investigation was over in days. Drowning. The easy answer. The dangerous currents off that coast had claimed them, or so everyone believed. Their families held memorials, scattered flowers in the waves, and tried to move on with lives shattered by loss and the cruel randomness of it all. For 3 years, life seemed to settle into a painful, normal for those left behind. But then, the ocean gave up its secret. A recreational diver, just doing what he loved, exploring the reef a few hundred yards from that same beach, found something that didn't belong. Wedged tight in the coral, a bright yellow waterproof case. Not trash, not lost jewelry, something far more disturbing. Inside, Meredith's phone, still working after 5 years underwater. And next to it, something small, white, plastic, a pregnancy test. The discovery didn't just reopen a cold case, it shattered the simple narrative everyone had accepted. Because if Meredith was pregnant, if she was planning to share that joy that night, then what really happened? What could be so terrible that someone would make two people, so full of life and hope, simply disappear forever? The call came on a foggy morning in San Francisco. Detective Raymond Flores, a name that would soon mean everything to Janine Caldwell, Meredith's sister, the one who'd spent the last 3 years building a quiet life, trying to forget the pain, trying to believe her sister was at peace somewhere in that vast, unforgiving ocean. Janine hadn't been back to that coastal town since the memorial, not once. But that phone call, that horrible, wonderful, terrifying phone call, changed everything. The drive down Highway 101 felt like a journey back through time, each mile heavier than the last. What would she find? What new nightmare had been hiding in plain sight for 5 years? The Marine Patrol Station was nothing special, but inside that sterile evidence room, Janine's world tilted on its axis. There was the phone, the lock screen still showing that photo from the engagement party. Her sister's laugh, frozen in time. And there, beside it, the pregnancy test. Positive. The implications hit her like a physical blow. Meredith was going to be a mother. She'd been carrying new life when she vanished. But who knew? Who might have had a reason to stop that future from ever beginning? The beach house. God, the beach house. Janine hadn't been able to face it, not for years. But now, standing in the driveway, seeing it perfectly maintained, like a shrine to a life that never ended, was almost too much. Harold, the caretaker, had kept it spotless. But he wasn't alone in his dedication. Marcus Ashford, David's best friend, the business partner, the brother they'd lost together, had been equally devoted, paying the bills, checking on the place, making sure everything was just as they left it. Such loyalty, such grief, or was it? Because grief doesn't usually come with a price tag. And maintaining a house, keeping it perfect like a museum exhibit, that takes more than sadness, it takes obsession. Or maybe, just maybe, it takes guilt. The kind of guilt that needs constant tending, a daily ritual of penance to keep the nightmares at bay. Janine found the journal in the back of Meredith's closet, a leather-bound book filled with her sister's hopes and fears. The entries about the baby were beautiful, full of excitement and terror in equal measure. But the last week's entries were different, filled with worry. Arguments between David and Marcus about the business, about expansion plans that scared Meredith, about David talking to lawyers, about buyouts and partnerships crumbling. And the final entry, written that Friday morning, Meredith had bought a tiny onesie, coming soon. She was planning to announce the pregnancy that night, hoping it would remind everyone, especially Marcus, that family came first, always. But she never got the chance. Instead of joy, instead of planning baby showers and choosing names, that dinner party became something else entirely. Something that ended with Meredith and David gone, vanished into the night, taking their secret and their unborn child with them. The knock on the beach house door came while Janine was still crying over those final pages. She wasn't surprised to see Marcus Ashford standing on the porch. He looked exactly the same, successful, charming, carrying that same easy confidence. That had made him a natural leader. He hugged her, asked how she was, expressed his condolences all over again. He'd driven down that Friday night, he said, waited for them. They never came to dinner. He'd left around 9. But something about the way he said it, something in the careful way his eyes moved around the room, made Janine's skin crawl. Because grief, real grief, doesn't usually come with perfect alibis and rehearsed stories. It comes with tears and confusion and the desperate need to understand. Marcus had answers. Too many answers. And then there was Alina, Harold's wife. nervous, glancing over her shoulder like she was afraid someone might hear. She'd seen Marcus's boat that night, not leaving at 9, like he claimed, but at 2 in the morning, leaving the dock where Meredith and David had vanished. Long after, they were supposed to be drowned in the ocean. What was he doing there? Why was he lying? The pieces were starting to move, starting to form a picture that made Janine's blood run cold. Because, if Marcus had been there, if he'd lied about something so simple as the time he left, what else was he lying about, and what was he so afraid of that he'd need to keep those lies going for 5 long years? The boathouse. That's where she'd found the next piece of the puzzle. Industrial tarps, heavy duty, the kind used for messy jobs, and bleach, lots of it. Marcus had explained it away, talked about fishing, about the smell of the sea, about maintaining a clean boat. But Janine wasn't buying it. Not anymore. Because cleaning a boat doesn't usually require tarps thick enough to hold a body, and it doesn't require enough bleach to sanitize a crime scene. The invitation came as they were leaving the boathouse. A casual suggestion, why don't we go out? Take the boat to where they found the phone. Maybe we'll see something else. The diver missed. Just like that, a boat ride, a chance to find more closure. It sounded innocent enough, maybe even kind. But Janine knew better now. She'd seen the way his eyes changed when she mentioned the business papers. She'd seen the gun in the diving bag. And now, sitting in the cabin of his boat, watching the shore disappear behind them, she knew exactly what kind of closure he had planned. The kind that never lets you go home. The kind that leaves you sleeping with the fishes, just like Meredith and David. The water was perfect. He'd said, calm, clear, ideal for diving. Ideal, she realized now, for making things disappear. Forever, she wasn't going to find answers underwater. She was going to become another secret, another mystery for the ocean to keep. Another body, weighted down, never to be found. The GPS beeped. They'd reached the coordinates. Marcus was already pulling on his wetsuit, his back to her, completely unaware that his confession was about to be cut short by the sound of powerful engines approaching at full speed, unaware that the Coast Guard had received a very specific distress signal just minutes before, unaware that his perfect plan, 5 years in the making, was about to come crashing down around him. But Janine was ready. She'd made sure of that. The question now wasn't whether the truth would come out. The question was whether she'd live long enough to see it happen. The engines were deafening, cutting through the relative quiet of the ocean and Marcus's rant. Janine saw the orange and white hull of the Coast Guard cutter slice through the swells towards them, its siren now wailing. Marcus, still on top of her, looked up, his face twisting in rage and disbelief. The gun clattered across the deck as they both turned to see the inevitable. Damn it, he snarled, his weight shifting dangerously as he tried to look back at the approaching vessel. His hands, which had been around her throat, loosened slightly as his focus split between Janine and the rescue. That split second was all Janine needed. Years of sailing with her father, of learning to move quickly and efficiently on a boat, kicked in. She bucked her hips hard, using her legs to push against his chest. Simultaneously, she grabbed his wrist with one hand and clawed at his eyes with the other. The element of surprise, combined with her sudden movement, sent Marcus sprawling sideways. He hit the deck hard, rolling towards the gun. Janine scrambled backwards, her lungs burning, towards the cabin entrance. She needed distance, something solid between her and that weapon. Marcus, now on his hands and knees, lunged for the pistol. Janine's foot connected with his wrist just as his fingers closed around the grip. The gun skidded across the slick deck, spinning out of reach towards the opposite rail. "You stupid bitch," Marcus roared, spinning on his knees to face her. His usually composed facade was completely gone, replaced by raw, animalistic fury. He launched himself at her again. Janine grabbed the nearest thing she could find, a heavy maintenance wrench left on a bench, and swung it with all her might. It caught Marcus on the shoulder, spinning him off balance. He crashed into the cabin wall, and Janine didn't hesitate. She bolted for the companionway, her legs shaky but moving. "Stop," Marcus bellowed, charging after her. But she was already below deck, slamming the cabin door shut and fumbling for the lock. A second later, his weight hit the door from the outside, the wood groaning under the impact. Janine pressed her back against the door, her heart hammering. She looked around wildly for another exit, another weapon, anything. The small cabin felt like a trap. Then she heard it, the unmistakable sound of a radio crackling to life. The Coast Guard must have restored some communication. "This is Coast Guard Cutter Guardian. Responding to distress call, Sierra Alpha November 4729. Boats, please identify yourselves." "Thank God," Janine whispered, her voice hoarse. She grabbed the radio handset from its cradle. "This is Janine. Caldwell, I need immediate assistance. The man on this boat, Marcus Ashford, he's confessed to murder. He tried to kill me." Static, then, a clear voice. "Ma'am, this is Lieutenant Sarah Chin, on the Guardian. We are on final approach. Please stay calm and secure yourself below deck. We are coming aboard now." Above her, Marcus was still battering. At the door, but his shouts were now tinged with panic. "Janine, open the door. You don't understand. They'll never believe you over me." She didn't respond. Instead, she grabbed a chair and jammed it under the door handle, adding her weight to it. The pounding continued, but the door held. She slumped against the wall, trying to catch her breath. Listening to the chaos above, the roar of the cutter's engines grew louder. And then she felt the Sea Ray lurch slightly as it was boarded, shouted orders, the thud of boots on deck, and, suddenly, blessedly, the pounding on the door stopped. "Marcus Ashford, U.S. Coast Guard, you are under arrest," came a commanding voice. No, you don't understand." Marcus's voice was different now, pleading, desperate. "She's lying. I was helping her. We were diving for the bodies." More voices, firm and authoritative. "Hands behind your back. You have the right to remain silent." Janine waited, listening to the muffled sounds of struggle, of metal clicking as handcuffs were applied. Finally, a gentle knock came on the cabin door. "Ma'am, Lieutenant Chen, it's safe to come out now." She moved the chair and opened the door. A woman in a Coast Guard uniform stood there, concern evident on her face. "Are you all right, ma'am?" Janine nodded, stepping onto the deck. The sight that greeted her was surreal. Marcus sat on the deck, hands cuffed behind his back, flanked by two armed Coast Guard officers. His expensive suit was disheveled, his face red with fury and frustration. The Guardian was tied up alongside, its crew already beginning to secure the scene. "He tried to kill me," Janine said to the lieutenant. He confessed to killing Meredith and David." Lieutenant Chen's expression hardened. "We heard part of it over the radio. Can you give us a full statement?" As the Coast Guard tended to her bruises and took her initial statement right there on the pitching deck, Janine recounted the nightmare, Elena's revelation about the boat's late-night departure, the discovery of the business documents showing the expansion conflict, and finally, Marcus's chilling, matter-of-fact confession about the poisoned wine, the tarps, and the weighted bodies dumped in the deep water. "He said they died holding hands," she finished, her voice breaking. "He said he gave them that, at least." The lieutenant's face was grim. "We'll get him for this. But first, let's get you some medical attention." As they prepared to transfer her to the Coast Guard cutter, Janine looked back at Marcus. He met her gaze, and for a moment, the mask slipped again. Gone was the grieving friend, the successful businessman. In its place was something hollow, something that had been hiding in plain sight for 5 long years. "You should have stayed away," he said quietly, almost to himself, and then he was gone, led away towards the Guardian, and Janine was left on the deck of his boat, surrounded by strangers who had saved her life, finally knowing the truth but feeling no peace. The ocean, which had taken so much, now lapped gently against the hull, as if it too was waiting for the final chapter of this terrible story to unfold. The bruises on her throat throbbed, a physical reminder of how close she had come to joining Meredith and David in that cold, dark place beneath the waves. But she was alive, and now, finally, the real work of justice could begin. The trial was swift. Marcus Ashford, the tech titan, the grieving friend, the philanthropist, didn't even make it to a jury. Faced with his detailed confession recorded by the Coast Guard, the physical evidence from his boat, the GPS logs, and the recovered bodies, he pled guilty to 2 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. The media frenzy was intense but brief. The facts were too stark, too horrifying for prolonged speculation. Innovate Tech, the company built on a foundation of friendship and apparently sustained by betrayal, was sold. The proceeds, after legal fees and reparations, went into the very foundation Marcus had created, now genuinely honoring Meredith and David's memory, providing scholarships as he'd promised, but without the taint of blood money funding it. The bodies were laid to rest, properly, finally, in a joint ceremony. Janine read the eulogy, her voice strong despite the tears, speaking not just for Meredith and David, but for the child they would never meet. The future stolen by greed, disguised as ambition. The small white casket, holding the tiny onesie Meredith had bought coming soon, sat beside their larger caskets. It was a heartbreaking detail, but Alina, now able to speak freely, had remembered seeing Marcus carry a small wrapped gift from the house that night. The forensics team found traces of Meredith's blood on the wrapping paper, confirming its origin. It seemed fitting that the symbol of their hope should rest with them. Months later, Janine stood on the deck of the beach house, now officially transferred to her name. Harold still maintained it, but now, as her employee, not Marcus's proxy. The garden bloomed again, but it felt different now, alive with memory rather than frozen in denial. She'd moved back, not to dwell in the past, but to reclaim it, to build something new where something terrible had happened. The ocean stretched out before her, no longer just a symbol of loss, but of resilience, of secrets finally brought to light. She held Meredith's journal, its final entry now, a testament not to dashed hopes, but to a love strong enough to endure even murder. Detective Flores had visited her just last week. The deepwater recovery team had found something else. Wedged near the anchor point where Marcus had disposed of the bodies, Meredith's wedding ring. It had slipped off her finger, perhaps during the struggle Marcus had never mentioned, or when he wrapped her in the tarp. It was a small thing, but it meant everything. It was proof, if any more was needed, that Meredith had fought, that she hadn't simply vanished without a trace, but had been present until the very end. Janine wore it now, next to her own wedding band. A constant reminder of the sister she loved and the justice finally served. She thought often about Alina, who had found the courage to speak after years of fear. Harold had been angry initially, worried about losing the financial support Marcus had provided, but eventually, he understood. He'd apologized to Janine, not for protecting his family's security, but for not trusting her enough to tell her what he suspected. They had all been manipulated, kept in line by a combination of charm, wealth, and subtle threats. Alina now worked full-time at the marina, no longer looking over her shoulder. The nightmares came less frequently now. When they did, they weren't just about Marcus's cold confession or his hands around her throat. Sometimes, they were about that final dinner, about Meredith's laugh echoing in the beach house, about David's excitement for the baby. Those dreams, though painful, were a comfort. They reminded Janine that the love between her sister and David had been real, untainted by what came after. Marcus could steal their lives, but not their joy. Not entirely. She closed the journal and walked back inside, leaving the door open to let in the afternoon breeze. Life was rebuilding itself here, slowly but surely. The past was laid to rest, not forgotten, but understood. The ocean had given up its secrets, justice had been served, and Janine Caldwell, forever changed, had found her way home. The waves crashed against the shore, a constant rhythm, a reminder that time moved forward, carrying tragedy and healing in its currents, washing away the worst of what had happened while leaving behind the enduring truth of love and loss. The story of Meredith and David was no longer just one of disappearance and mystery. It was a story of a terrible crime, yes, but also of a family's determination, of hidden courage, and ultimately, of justice found. Asterisk,